Xcraft 39 back here with you again, and it's been a little bit longer than I was hoping to get back in the shop to start on the TBD. The storm we got was epic, and the transmission went out on my truck, so I couldn't plow. Ended up doing a lot of shoveling and just got the truck into the shop today. Anyways, the fix for that is shop therapy. And you know what we're going to work on? The TBD. So I wanted to show you really quick. We're going to start off by painting the interior components and getting them all ready for assembly. So that means zinc chromate to start with. But before we can do that, we need, using the Edard PE kit. This comes with pretty thorough instructions, shows you exactly what you need to do. These red areas here, all these red areas, these components all need modifying in order for the PE to go on, because they have molded gauges and whatnot and switches and that kind of thing. And we're getting rid of all that. We're going to remove it all, and we're going to start with the PE. So we'll get that all taken care of. Get those things cleaned up. We'll get the zinc chromate sprayed, and we'll start working on the PE. So let's get at that right now. Okay, I have a few of these components cut off the trees. I usually like to spray these parts. Like if we weren't adding this PE kit, I would be spraying all these parts on the trees before I did any assembly. But it's just going to be a lot easier to remove these doodads and buttons and whatnot that we need to modify for the PE kit without them on the trees. So these here, this dash component, it's just got a few little nubs on it. Nothing to speak of. One there, and then there's this little rectangle there. And I don't think we need to do any cutting on that. I think we can probably just use this sanding stick. I just put this on my oak block here, just so I get a solid surface. And we'll just sand that down. Well, it might be a little hard to hold. There, and the nubs are already nearly gone. They're really quite small. You could use an X-Acto knife for this too. But this seems to work fairly well. There, the nubs are gone, the rectangle's gone. I got one little bit of a nub right there yet. Not much. So there. Now that piece is smooth, and in sanding it like this, I never really thought of it this way until just right now, but it actually gives a little tooth for the super glue to attach to. So there, that one is modified. We'll do the same thing with this one. I haven't looked into the future of the build manual. I'm assuming this is for the pilot and this is for the back seater. There we go. And there we go. That one's cleaned up. And we got this little, assuming that's like a piece of radio equipment. I'm going to file that down. That's part H14 for anyone that's interested. Again, very, very easy to get this stuff off. And again, you could use an X-Acto too. We'll end up using an X-Acto on this stuff to get the bulk of it off. Okay, so there, that one is done. And then once they're painted the chromate, then we'll go back and put the PE components on. So let's see here. So we need to remove, it looks like, all of this stuff, not this. So from this point forward, we need to smooth this out, and all of this needs to go. So for the majority of this, we'll use this X-Acto. This is almost painful sometimes. I mean, it's pretty good looking stuff. But we're going to put better looking stuff on there. We can get the majority of that carved off of there. And then we'll take our sanding stick back and finish it off. I think I've mentioned before, I don't like PE at all. It's a royal pain in the butt, in my opinion. However, on this kit, I decided, since it's 32nd scale, it's bigger. The PE is bigger, so easier to work with. My biggest complaint is the stuff is, some of it is so tiny that I can't even hardly find it. You drop it on something and it's just gone. The stuff just disappears. Some of you might notice that underneath all this, I have a white towel that I build on. Yeah, a white towel. I find, someone else will say otherwise, I'm sure. However, I find that if I drop a part, it does that. Instead of that and bounce around and potentially lose it. So the towel to me helps keep stuff where I want it if I drop something. And then I just flip it and fold it as I get paint on it and mess it up and make it look horrible. Be careful right here. Be careful right here. You don't want to remove this bar. Okay, because the PE is going to butt up to that right here. Okay. Now this, you can still see the outlines of it. But that is smooth, so we've got a good surface for the PE to bond to. Okay, so now we'll do the same thing on this side, except all of this has to go. And this one's going to take a little bit more sanding, I think, because there's a panel right here, a raised panel in this area that all has to go. It sets up a little bit higher than this side. And we got to get rid of all of that. Sorry for those of you that are freaking out because I'm pulling this knife towards myself. I have been doing this for so many years. I've just gotten to the point where I can control it pretty well. You just go lightly. You don't have to get crazy. Carve some of this off instead of trying to sand it, because it's going to take a bit to try to sand that down. Okay, now we're not going to sand this down flush. These little guys right here, here, and this is all recessed. So we don't need to sand it to get rid of all that stuff. We're just going to be going over top of it. But this is pretty wavy now from carving on it. So we need to smooth this down. You want a good flat surface for your PE to bond to. Trust me, I learned the hard way doing some PE and not having the surface smooth or flat enough. And then the PE just wants to stick in select spots where it happens to touch. And I've had issues with it coming off because of that, because it's not bonded well, despite using super glue on it. Okay, so this is nice and smooth. This is nice and smooth. All these pieces are ready for their PE. This one has to be trimmed down in length. 1.5 millimeters. And then there's a piece of PE. There's a piece of PE that goes on it with this crank handle, which is part of the kit. But we got to remove the back part of this, 1.5 millimeters. So that's going to be a little trickier. I'll get out my caliper, and I think what I'm going to do, I'm gonna sand this. I'll probably put a piece of sandpaper flat on this block instead of using the sanding stick, because this is soft. And with this little guy, using this sanding stick, or this sanding stick, I should say, it'll probably end up rounding the edges, because inevitably, no matter how hard you try, you're going to end up rocking back and forth a little bit as you work this, and it'll end up rounding the edges, and then it won't bond well on the back side. Or when you go to attach it, that's what I'd be worried about there. So I'm going to pause this video, and I'm going to get my caliper, and I'm going to get this trimmed down, because that's going to be boring stuff that, you know, no one's really going to want to watch. But I'll tell you how I went about it, and I'll be right back. Yeah, I went ahead and cut this down. Now, it started out at 4.25, and I actually went a little bit too far. We're down to like 2.57. I got a little bit too aggressive at the end. I got greedy, and took it down just a little bit too far. But we're fine with that. It's going to be just fine. It's such a small amount. It's 1/4 of a millimeter. Not even 1/4 of a millimeter. I used this caliper, you know, Harbor Freight, and this thing works really good. It's Quinn brand, so it's a better one. I had one of the really cheap Harbor Freight ones for a while, but there's real issues with battery connection problems in those. So I would avoid those if you're going to plan on getting one. This Quinn, though, this is nice. Comes with a nice little storage box for it. And the other one did too, to be fair. But this is a much nicer piece. So I would recommend that if you need something. So this particular component will now get glued on to the back of part D4. And this guy, we're going to have to cut down these locating pins just a little bit. I already trial fit it, and had I not gotten greedy and gone a little bit too far with this, I wouldn't have to cut down these locating pins. But now they're just a hair too long. You know what, let's just sand them. They're just a hair too long, and they keep the piece from sitting flush. And I mean, realistically, we could cut those off completely and just glue them on if we want to. But I'm going to choose not to do that. And yep, notice I'm still working on the tree here. There we go. Now we're sitting flush. So now we're good there. This will get painted, and then the PE will be added. So we're going to grab our Tamiya Ultra or Extra Thin. I mentioned in a previous video that I use MEK, and I just refill these little bottles. And MEK will do the same thing. And while it is getting harder to find, yep, because especially here in Michigan, because they changed the laws as far as VOCs go. So yeah, it's getting hard to find. They can use up the existing quantities, but can't sell anymore. So when I found it, I found 2 quart cans and bought both of them. Okay, so that's glued on. We have these cleaned up. There's this component here that is part of the inside of the fuselage, part A1 to be specifically. That's the starboard side. And I can't exactly tell what they're wanting me to remove here. There is something, but it doesn't give a location of this part. So when we get to doing this, it'll probably become evident what we need to do. But for now, I'm not going to do anything here, just to be certain we don't mess anything up. So we'll set that aside. We got that little round piece taken care of. In sanding that, I just laid a piece of sandpaper on this oak block, and it gave me a good firm surface. And if you're going to do that, I don't have anything good to demo with. I'll show you with this X-Acto knife handle. So while you're doing that, going back and forth, spin it like this. And that'll keep you from ending up with an uneven surface on the backside, an angled surface. Okay? It'll keep it flat if you just keep spinning while you're sanding. And it was getting a little bit hard to hold. At first it was easy. It was tall enough, so it was easy to grab. However, as I was sanding it down, it started getting harder and harder to hold. So anything thinner than that, it's going to be really hard to do that. But where there's a will, there's always a way. So now we are ready to spray our zinc chromate. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and get the parts ready for the PE to be installed. And I'll be back. Before we can start doing our painting, I discovered a few pieces we needed to construct. And I went ahead and I've done some of it. So like this guy, I'm guessing this is batteries. This is 2 pieces, and this needed to be assembled, and it needs to be glued in place on the back side of this floor, like this here. So we're going to go ahead and get this done. That gets painted. You know, this manual calls out zinc chromate, but I'm betting this should probably be black. So you know what? We're going to wait. We're not going to do that yet until we're certain. I'll try to find some photos, but, you know, being that there are no Devastators in museums anywhere, I don't know how common photos are going to be, so we're going to have to figure that out. However, there was another little component, this little guy, this little, I don't know if this is a tank of some sort or what this is, to be quite honest with you. It was 2-piece. There's a little locating hole on the back side of it, and that gets attached to the back of the seat, the front man's seat. So you can tell by the headrest here. And this locating pin right here is where we're going to put that. And there is a definite up to it. It is not uniform. You can see here. It's a little bit narrower at the top. And these bands are not centered. So it is, it does need to go on a specific direction. Get that locating pin to line up. Oh, we had it on there. Okay, there we go. And we'll throw a little bit of bonder in there. Okay, the other thing I wanted to show you was this guy here. This comes off the tree like this. And it does not, it is not installed like this. These pieces here, 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 and here are all ejector pins. Or 4 ejector pins for the molds when they're making them. So when it gets ejected from the molds, it pushes on these pins. And it doesn't end up leaving injector marks on your parts, which is really nice that they do that these days. But we got to cut those off. And then we'll clean it up just a little bit. These end ones probably won't be visible once it's installed. But we're going to hit it a little bit anyway. I learned from a friend many years ago, my friend Mike. Back when I used to fly RC, we used to build a lot. And I learned back there from him, his building is so clean and is so neat and so nice that I started emulating his building. And what that meant to me is if the stuff on the inside that you don't see is done really clean and nice, the exterior will also be really clean and nice. So, even if it's stuff you don't see, I usually will clean it up anyway. So now here's our piece. And there's these little holes here. They're going to locate it. And that goes on this part here where we just installed this tank or whatever this is. I wish I knew exactly. I don't see any, there's no information as to what that is. And I wouldn't expect there to be, honestly, either. So this goes on like this. So this little hole needs to be on the bottom. Okay, so we're going to get that over these locating pins here. This might get a little tricky. I can get one, I can rotate it into position and get, there we go. There we go. So we got one, and then we can rotate it up, and the other one should just drop right on. Just like that. Okay, and then we'll take a little bit of our bonder, and we'll just do that, and it'll wick right around there onto that pin. Okay, so now we have that piece constructed, what we can do with it. And the other thing I ended up doing was these guys here. So those parts, and I installed this here. And these are part of the floor. This is where the feet would be. And this is going to interlock in these tabs, and you can see there, it's a floor bracing is what those are. And there's some little locking tabs there that they align into, and then there's also locating points on the floor also. So very easy to install. So this is going to go like this. And these front pieces, they go in between. You can see here and here. They go in between those. So it locates really nicely. And you end up with this dual layer here. So the pilot seat will be up here. Sorry, pilot seat will be up here. This will be the backrest right in this area. So we're not going to paint this, or we're not going to install this yet until after it's painted, because getting an airbrush down in there to paint it all would be tough. And you could do it, to be quite frank with you, if you blew some paint down in there, and if you covered it well enough, no one would probably notice. However, that is not what we're going to do. We're going to paint this ahead of time, so when it goes on, it is fully painted everywhere. Okay, so I'm gonna pause here for a moment. I'm gonna find out about this, or see if I can find out about this, what I believe is a battery. The manual's calling this out to be zinc chromate, but that's a battery. I would bet it really is supposed to be black. But let's try to find that out, and if I can find that information, I will certainly relay it. However, if it is a battery, I am going to deviate from the manual and paint this black. Okay, so I'll be back in a few moments. Okay, so that was segment number 1 of what's looking like it's going to be a 5 or maybe 6 episode series just for this cockpit construction. I have them all filmed. I just got to get them edited and posted. So look for those. Hopefully within the next couple days, I'll try to get a couple more up in addition to this one here. So don't forget to like and subscribe while you're there. And don't forget, keep your fingers out of the glue.